You know, I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I gotta tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I got to tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account. Get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On. Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. I'm Alex Greenwood, and I am very excited to have you back on the old pod because I've got a couple of wonderful surprises for you today. I have two incredible guests, two of my favorite writers of all time, who I'm actually proud to call friends in real life too, even though I've only met one of them in real life, but it doesn't really matter. A friend is a friend is a friend, and they're wonderful people, and we're going to be talking with Baylee and Jason McIntyre, a couple of my friends from north of the border, in just a moment here on the show. But again, welcome back to Mysterious Goings On. I wanted to give you a couple of quick notes while we were rolling here live from the Green Shebeen Studios. I have a quick book recommendation for you. If you are looking for something fun to read, you may recall that when I researched Big Cabin and Dispatches from the West, my grandfather's last book, I added a pulp fiction story that I found from 1957. I found it, I bought it on eBay, and I laboriously typed it in and added it at the end of Big Cabin. Well, one of my favorite authors, who we unfortunately lost last June, is Harlan Ellison, and if I could recommend a wonderful tome, it's again Honorable Whoredom at a penny a word, and this is some of Harlan's best pulp fiction stories. And what I love about it is not only do you get these wonderful stories, you get Harlan's introduction where he gives you some notes about the stories. You won't find Repent Harlequin, said the TikTok man in this book, nor will you find I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, A Boy and His Dog, or The Death Bird, or any of Harlan's myriad masterpieces. But what you will find is stories of crime and amorality, of sex and violence. I mean, it's got my name on it, I'm telling you. So, Harlan Ellison, again, Honorable Whoredom at a penny a word. It's the stuff Harlan did way back when he first started to try to make his weekly $7 rent. And I mean, think about it, penny a word, kind of come up with $7 for rent plus food. One of the giants, Harlan Ellison. So that's my recommendation for you. I wanted to mention also there's some new videos. There are some videos on the pilotscross.com page. There's also videos on our John Pilot Mysteries Facebook page. We just put up a new one that's a teaser for the whole series. I think it's kind of exciting, has some music, get your heart pounding. Take me to the pilot. Go check it out again on the John Pilot Mysteries Facebook page, as well as pilotscross.com, which is PILATESCROSS.com. Exercise your mystery muscles at Pilot's Cross, not Pilates. Okay, enough about that. And by the way, the podcast gods, knowing full well that I'm recording, have decided that the landscaper must come and blow his horn outside my window, which is actually a leaf blower. We'll just see how bad that is, and if it's really, really bad, we'll knock off. But I'm going to go ahead and soldier through because I have some guests who've been waiting patiently on the other end of the line here, and I want to make sure I get to them. But one last word on my grandfather, by the way. I just have to tell you, I believe in synchronicity. I believe in things happening that make life interesting. And I have a little screensaver on my computer. A lot of you may have the same screensaver. It's a definition of a word, correct? It'll pop up just, different words and their etymology and what they mean. Well, the one that popped up just now, right before I started recording, was Clarihue, which is a short comic or nonsensical verse, typically in 2 rhyming couplets with lines of unequal length and referring to a famous person. Well, my grandfather, who wrote Big Cabin and dozens of other books, was a historian by trade and a poet. And so I saw that and I thought, well, shoot, I need to go ahead and read a Clarihue in his honor before we get started here. So how about this one? He called it Ham on Rye. While playing cards, John Montague said, "Meat between sliced bread will do. The 4th Earl of Sandwich I be, and they'll name it after me." You can find more Clarihues in Big Cabin and Dispatches from the West available exclusively on Amazon.com. But now, without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our guest this morning. First off, Eden Baylee. After 20 years in the banking world, Eden Baylee gave it up to pursue her passion for writing. She's happy to say she hasn't looked back since. She's written several collections of erotica, flash fiction, and suspense novellas, all available on the major book sites. Her first novel in her trilogy with Dr. Kate Hampton, a psychological suspense called Stranger at Sunset, is now available, and she's working on the next 2 books in the series. Eden blogs regularly on music and travel, both of which inspire her to explore the psyche of her characters. She also runs an Airbnb as a side hustle, because in case you don't know, writing is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Boy, is it ever. Eden loves talking to readers, so connect to her via EdenBaylee.com, and that's Eden is E-D-E-N, and Baylee is B-A-Y-L-E-E, but there'll be a link in the show notes to make it easy on you, because that's the kind of guy I am. Regular listeners to the pod will recognize this guy. This is Jason McIntyre. He's the author of dozens of short stories, several novellas, and 6 novels. With over 150,000 downloads of his work in just a year, McIntyre was voted into the top 20 debut authors in the Goodreads Choice Awards. McIntyre's writing has been called noir and sophisticated, styled after the likes of Chuck Palahniuk, but with the pacing and mass appeal of Stephen King. His books also include eerie discoveries one might find in stories by Ray Bradbury or the telefilms of Rod Serling. His novels take place all over the world, from Vancouver to the Swiss Alps and the Japanese countryside, even the post-apocalyptic dystopian future. His books include the #1 Kindle suspense book, The Night Walk Men, bestsellers On the Gathering Storm, and Shed, plus the multi-layered coming-of-age literary suspense Phthalo Blue. Currently, he is at work on a standalone novel which also acts as the conclusion to the well-received Dovetail Cove mosaic saga of 10 titles. Learn more about Jason at thefarthestreaches.com. There'll also be a link in the show notes. Good day to you, Eden.
Hello, Alex. How are you?
Fantastic. It's so good to have you. Jason, you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having us both together.
Well, it's a pleasure. I love this getting together for a lot of reasons. One of them being that back 10 years ago, when I really got into the more indie side of writing, you two were 2 of the first people I met via the internet who were terribly, terribly kind to me and helpful and encouraging, and also were both, in a lot of ways, guideposts to me in my own writing. And so it's just a joy to have you both here together for what I hope will be a fun discussion.
I am definitely looking forward to it. It's been too long since we got to this stage. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for Eden, but I think the fan club is mutual. I think I felt the support and knowledge from both of you in those early days and continuing to this day. So I thank you both for the support over an entire decade of knowing one another. That's amazing to me.
It's pretty crazy. Well, I thought I'd jump in. I've got some things I'd love to talk to you guys about. And of course, we'll keep it freewheeling and we'll just go wherever the rabbit hole goes, if that sounds all right. Is everybody good with that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
One thing I really want to talk to 2 other writers about, and this is kind of great for you. I think for the 3 of us to get a little therapy with other writers here, and for the listeners, I think it might be fun, whether you read our stuff or not, just to hear the perspective of people who've been writing for a long time. And I'm sure we'll cover a lot of good and not so good. But one thing I've been really wanting to talk to you guys about is because recently I've been working closely with Jason on this, Eden, to kind of relaunch my series. I have 6 books in my series, the John Pilot Mysteries, with fresh covers, interiors, and I went through and cleaned up a few some little mistakes here and there, and just tweak some things just to make the books as good as I can make them. And I was rereading my first book, Pilot's Cross, and just cringing. And I don't mean cringing because it's so horrible. I mean, it's a first book. I always tell myself that. But there are some things, these traps that I fall into that I see. And I wonder if you guys have these. I just thought I'd share with you one of mine is that apparently my characters need to take some kind of prescription drug to stop eye rolling.
They eye roll a lot, do they?
Oh, gee. Eden, I went back and I cut about 6 eye rolls. I left a few in because, but I cut out at least 6 eye rolls. And, I'm going to have to consult an eye doctor for these folks and make sure they're all right. But
when helping you edit that, Alex, I didn't have the time, but I really wanted to just recut a scene where there was no dialogue between, say, Kate and John, where it was just eye rolls back and forth, and just see if you would have noticed. But yeah, I didn't have the time to do that.
Well, then you'd be like looking at my marriage. So
that's awful.
That's awful.
Only a woman would say that, but you two probably you'd be happy to banter back and forth on that, right?
Oh, likely.
Yes.
Well, what about you? And I'll just throw it out. Whoever wants to. Do you have anything that's you look back on, or that you do in your writing? It's a habit that you're dealing with.
Well, I fully understand what you're saying, Alex, because when I go back and I reread, let's say, my first story that I wrote or novella, I cringe as well. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because it actually means I can reread it and think, oh, wow, I'm so much better now than I was back then. Because if I kind of read it and felt, wow, this is really excellent, I don't feel like I would have improved as a writer, especially if I cannot sort of see the mistakes that I made early on. But one of my biggest crutches is I don't like using the same words. Obviously, when you're writing, you want to. I've got a thesaurus sort of open, constantly on my computer, and so nobody ever walks in my stories. They prance, they jump, they saunter, they crawl. So I think somebody actually pointed that out to me one time and said, you know what? Maybe the guy is just walking, So it's one of these where, I'm trying to be a bit too wordy, as maybe writers can tend to be. So sometimes bringing it back to simplicity is good. But I totally get what you're saying about, just cringing when you read your old stuff. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it means that you've moved on and you've improved. And so you sort of see those old mistakes, and hopefully it means you don't make them again.
And if I could just interject, Jason, I'm sorry to step on you for a second here, but I think ambulating, when I got to a point with ambulating, I'd stop if I were you. But I was going to say, that's such a, Eden, that's such a great thought, though, because, if you just look back and go, yeah, man, that's the shit. Yeah, man, that's fantastic. Yeah, I can't imagine doing that, because that would indicate to me just what you said, that if you're doing that, you're not really growing. But Jason, do you have something, or do you want to elucidate us on this?
I've been noticing, and I really don't want to go back and read anything from before. I'm almost too frightened to do so. But I've noticed, particularly in the last 3 years, my first drafts are riddled with crutch words. Like and like, not those specific words, but I'm noticing that I tend to, when I'm first drafting, I put these little placeholder words in that are similar to when you're speaking and you say like, and you say and you pause. I kind of put those in, and so my first drafts have these 5 or 6 crutch words, and some of them are little. I use the word little. So he heard a little sound, or there was a little pause. Well, come on. How extraneous can you get with language? So my first drafts are so embarrassing. Truly. So I never share anything with anybody, not even a beta reader or a friend, until at least I've gone through it a couple of times to get rid of at least those really embarrassing crutches.
Oh, I agree. I would never share any of those. That first draft, it's awful. I could barely read it myself, So yeah, definitely. Until I clean it up, it will not even get past a beta reader, let alone go to an editor.
That's a very vulnerable place to be, even with an editor you trust, because I think writers can be thin-skinned. Maybe a lot of people are in a lot of different vocations, but I think writers, at least the ones I know, tend to be a tiny bit thin-skinned, even if they protest, "Oh, I'm not. You can say whatever you want. Go ahead." But they, at least maybe I'm projecting, but I was a little thin-skinned early on. I'm getting better, but of course I was a newspaper guy, and I had editors who used to yell at me like, the guy from the Daily Planet yells at everybody on Superman or something. But I mean, you still, when you're putting your creative guts out there on the page and saying, would you edit this or look this over? It's a very vulnerable place to be. But by the same token, I find myself wishing that I had an editor who would have called me on a couple of things, because I had some editors early on. I'm not going to name names, and I'm not knocking them, but I wish they had said, "By the way, Alex," besides the eye rolling, which apparently they didn't catch, "Alex, I've noticed that you have very similar names here for a lot of your characters." And I'm like, because I look back now and I'm thinking, I've got 2 Ricks in this series. I've got a John, I've got a Jack, I've got a Kay, I've got a Kate. Anybody run into that problem, or do you have a technique with names?
I actually do. I never name my characters with the same first letter, actually, because I think it just makes it difficult for readers to keep track of. The other thing is, all of my bad characters usually begin with an M. It's, because I don't, that's named after an old boyfriend, I guess, So if it's a male character I don't like, or he's a jerk, well, his name is probably Michael or Mitch or Matt or whatever. So that's a little bit of a giveaway for my books. But other than that...
Wow.
Yeah,
that is awesome. Love that.
That's one way to get back at an old flame, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I think I just try to give them strong names. I'm not, unless it's a character I don't like, then I'll just give them a sort of a throwaway name. Like, I don't want to name any names, but there's certain names that I don't myself like. So I give my good characters the good strong names that I would give a child if I had one.
I love, and I'll echo what Jason said. I love what you're doing there with the naming, with the villains and things. That's really, really clever. That's something that kind of opens another question, which I have a lot of Easter eggs in my book. I mean, I have a 6-book series. Of course, Jason, you've written a ton more books than me, and Eden, you're on track with several books yourself. Do you ever have little Easter eggs that only, like the one Eden, you just mentioned, that you're pretty well sure that you're the only one who'll ever find in your books?
Good question. I'm not sure about that. I don't think I hide too many things in there. I try to be clever, but not overly clever, so that because I feel like readers they will find it. So I want them to find it eventually. I don't want to hide it so much so that they have no clue and that it's just in my own head, so which could be the case as well. I'm not sure. Maybe Jason has more. I get the feeling he might.
I think, Alex, you and I have talked about this. I think you and I both probably put in an extra 50% more than is probably allowable by law in the particular province or state where we reside. And I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we both really want readers to catch more than they do. And when a reader does, it's the most gratifying thing. It's almost like a reader can come to you and say, "Hey, I noticed that you named this pub in this story after this other thing in this book from 10 years ago." And they could give the book a 1-star rating, and you're like, "I don't care. They got the name of the pub.
Right.
That's fine. I love it." Yeah, I like that stuff probably too much. I shouldn't. It's a disease.
Well, I think I'm completely throw myself on the mercy of the court of trying to be too cute by half, but I enjoy it. I do get readers who say, "Wow, I like this." And one thing I have noticed, though, is that readers really appreciate the way I've been able to thread different little details throughout just about every book There's a couple of corny details. I'm a pretty big fan of Colin Hay's music, so there's either a mention of a song or even in one episode or one book where he makes an appearance. Yeah, I don't really name him, but it's clear that's who he is, and people seem to enjoy that. And I had a fan who actually bought all the books and gave them to him at a concert, which I'm cringing about because I'm sure he was like, "Oh, thank you very much," and went and put them right in the trash. But I enjoy doing that. I think it's fun to leave little presents for especially the readers who are really into the series, to find some stuff. And I also kind of hint at it and hope that it encourages a second read if they get a chance. So I think that's interesting that we all three do it in our own way. Jason, I think that Eden is obviously more mature than we are, and it's not...
Well, yeah.
Well, that's a given. No, I'm joking. I really am. I think you two are just more clever in that way, perhaps. I think you've also written... You've written more books. You've written more books, and you in a series, so you could sort of embed that information in there a little bit more discreetly, perhaps. I don't know. We shall see.
Well, as for the Colin Hay thing, I've been used to reading it in Alex's books for so many years that I actually slipped Colin Hay into one of my books that's coming out as another Easter egg for people who happen to have read both of our things. It's kind of amusing to me.
Yeah,
that's
fun.
Fantastic.
It's fun. Yeah, and maybe someday Colin will truly get in on that and say something to one of us. It's just a little secret hope that will never happen.
Oh, that scheme you have, eh?
That's my scheme there, yeah. I wanted to kind of move forward a little bit here. I think that a lot of people who read the books, they have a clue that it's a lot of work to write a book. And we, on this podcast, have talked so much about working with editors and cover artists, and a little bit about the marketing side of it, and not to take us out of the fun part, which is the writing part, but into the not as much fun, the marketing part. And I'd like to start, Jason, with you on this one. What do you wish every reader knew about what it takes out of you as basically the CEO, janitor, and head bottle washer of Jason McIntyre books? Is the marketing side a huge part of what you're doing? How does that work for you?
I wish every reader did understand exactly what you just said, which is I'm chief cook and bottle washer. I write it. I do a lot of the editing. Of course, it has to be then handed off to pro editors with a separate set of eyes who either give editorial direction or grammatical and typo fixes. And it often goes through a couple of stages. Even before that, there's a whole beta stage where friends or paid beta readers or just really passionate readers of one's work do a beta read and give suggestions and help you hone a story, maybe cutting chapters, maybe moving chapters, maybe omitting characters, whatever it is. And then there's the whole design of the book itself, either for print or for ebook, the interior, making sure it is looking its best on all the platforms, in addition to how it's going to look printed, and that involves cover design and several revisions of that too. There's a lot of expense to those things. Sometimes you're paying beta readers. Sometimes you're always paying editors, and you're always paying designers to do that work. So, between the cost and the time, there's no way that any indie writer can put out material at the same pace that a big publisher, a medium publisher, or even a small publisher can do, because all of those hats are worn by different people when you have that setup. So an indie author really has to go out and procure those services and manage all those services, kind of like a contractor building a house. So that house is going to take longer. In the end, I feel that the quality of the product, the content, the story, the delivery, I think can be just as good as a big publisher, a medium publisher. But that's probably what I would say, is that it'd be awesome if readers understood the whole breadth of what we're doing, each of us.
What do you think, Eden?
Well, I think Jason gives a really good summary of all the activities an indie author has to do, from writing until getting the book out there. And then not only, it doesn't stop there, because then you've got to actually promote the book afterward. So you've got this, let's say, really wonderful product, and it looks great, and it's reads well with your beta readers. It's well edited, but now you actually have to market it. And so that's another piece that an indie author needs to look after. You don't have a machine of people promoting it, putting you out there into the world, let's say with a book signing or a billboard here or there or wherever these bigger authors actually sell their books. So, promotion for, I think, many indie authors is through social media, through all of the different platforms, such as Facebook, Twitter, whatever, wherever you can actually go and tell people about your book. So I think that's a huge piece. So it's wonderful to get a book out there. The writing piece of it is the most enjoyable and the most difficult, but then everything else that goes along with it, to actually get more of your writing out to a wider audience, that's huge as well. Otherwise, your book will just sort of stay. Let's say you put it up on Amazon, and that's where it stays. But if you actually promote it, then it gets out to a wider audience. So it's a big process, and it's a long process for every book. And I think we as indie writers are actually pretty productive. Some are anyway. I think you, Alex, and Jason are incredibly productive and put out very good material for indie writers. Others who can just sort of grind it out there, putting out a book every week just because it's possible. But the quality is bad. So it's a real fine line to walk as an indie writer. Quality versus quantity, and the timing that it takes to put out a worthy product to be read.
Oh, that is so well said, Eden. What occurs to me, and I will throw this out to you. Maybe I'm wrong, but in my opinion, indie writers are almost held to a higher standard than anybody who's like with a big five publisher or even a mid-list publisher or a small house. It seems to me that we are held to a very high standard. And, because I can assure you, if there's even a minor mistake in one of my books, and I'm talking like a comma in the wrong place or something, I've heard about it. And I've been to book clubs where people get righteous about it. And it always steamed me. Jason knows this story because it always steamed me to hear that, because I would, at the very same time, I remember that the day after that, I was picked up a book by an author, a big five published author, very big name, bestseller person, and there were 3 mistakes in the book, and I'm just thinking, criminy, it's like, it's not fair, it's like we have to do all the work here, and then the things that make us human slip through, and we're still kind of penalized for it. So I guess enough of my bitch and moaning, but I guess what I'm saying is, do you feel, either or both of you, that I'm on the right track here with this, or do you think, no, you're not held to any higher standard than anybody else, or how do you feel about that? And I'll just throw that out to whoever wants to catch it.
I don't want to step on Eden here, but my first thought was right away, 10 years ago when I started self-publishing, I noticed that one of the biggest tips or the biggest trends was using social media to get in touch with readers as part of a promotional and marketing stance. And I opened it up right away and said, hey, if you see a typo in an ebook, send it my way. And I was very vocal about wanting to chat with readers because, the idea of having a reader, like one reader, blew my mind. Right. So if I could get 3, hey, great. Talk to me. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me what you want me to write next if you think I'm a decent writer. And so on sites like particularly Goodreads at that time, and on Facebook and on Twitter a little bit, but a lot on Goodreads, is I had actual conversations with readers. That's a thing that indies do that, Stephen King and James Patterson has never, you don't have Stephen King's email address. You can't tell him that he made a typo or that he had an anachronism in his novel that he wrote in 1986. There's no dialogue with bigger name, traditionally published authors. There is with me and Alex and probably Eden. I think you have a lot of dialogue with your readers So there's a sense of familiarity. I think they feel like they can point out a typo, or they can say, "Yeah, I didn't care for that one as much as the one before it. That first book was good, and your second one was just not quite as." So I think there's that openness a bit more. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with you, Jason. The other thing I think the three of us have are blogs. I mean, I've had a blog from when I first started, and so when you have a blog, you basically have a forum where people can come and make comments on your blogs. And if you're blogging about your actual books, you're either using your blog as a way to market your books or to bring in some feedback about a particular story, or you're talking about writing as a craft. People feel free to come in and make a comment or to talk to you about stuff, or my email is right there. So I think from the very beginning, I always said, I love talking to readers, because if it were not for readers, I would not be able to write
Nice.
as a living. So I think it is important that, we stay in touch with the people who actually pay the bills, and hold us to that higher standard. And I totally agree with you, Alex, that indies are held to a higher standard. I mean, I read newspaper articles
Oh yeah.
online,
Oh yeah.
and the typos are just ridiculous. Like, I mean, I don't even think they have editors anymore some places.
They don't.
Whereas, indies are held to a higher standard, and there are some indies who may not care to get an editor, or they don't care about grammar or book covers or any of these other things that actually go into making a good final product. But I think the ones who do care would say that it's difficult to put out a quality product, and you are held to that higher standard over and above, let's say, somebody who's like a Stephen King. He's got an army of people to do each and every piece for him, whereas we don't. I mean, we could hire an assistant if we could afford to do that, to do all of that marketing, but I don't. So I'm a control freak for that reason. That's probably part of it. But I think it's you're right in that sense, Alex. It's difficult for that reason, the higher standard piece.
But I love how you both have kind of flipped it back at me, because from a kind of a customer service angle, I guess, that you want that feedback. I think probably my negative take on the feedback was that they always just seem so damn angry about it. It wasn't, hey, let me help you out. It was like, I can't believe I spent money on this book and there's a typo on page 236, and I just thought, wow.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Alex, and I've had those experiences too. My feeling on that is I do agree with everything you both just said, and I do agree that it is a higher standard that haunts us. I feel like, and I'll be very blunt honest, I mean, if a Stephen King book has 1,500 reviews on Amazon, there's no way that Stephen King is reading those, right?
Yeah.
He's just not.
Why should he?
Some marketing person at his publisher might be reading some of those. For the three of us, we might have 60 reviews. It's more plausible that we would read all of those, and maybe 2 or 3 of those would be a complaint. So we're more likely also to
Great point.
to experience those negative pieces than, I mean, just using Stephen King as an example throughout here, out of those 1,500, there's going to be a huge swath of people that are complaining, bitching and moaning about something he did, but he's not going to come into contact with that feedback, whereas we more likely are, right? Because we're sitting in a bookstore like you were when you got that angry lady.
Well, Jason, it was a book club, and they were these ladies were drinking wine, so that probably. And I mean, this the lady who invited me was such a sweetheart. She was a little embarrassed, but I said, listen, I'm happy to refund your money if it's really. And I think this person had a really bad day. Okay. Well, this conversation's on fire. We're going to have to keep going. So I would like you to tune in next week to Mysterious Goings On, live from the Green Shebeen Studios, and we'll hear more from Eden and Jason. So until next time, go to pilotscross.com and keep reading.
Do you like podcasts about great writing, science fiction, and getting your lobes rubbed?
Well, who doesn't?
Then why not check out the Audio Umox podcast? Audio Umox covers every episode of what just may be the best Star Trek series, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which may also be one of the greatest science fiction shows in history.
Get an earful of the best, worst, and merely amusing from the Star Trek Deep Space Nine series. On Audio Umox, two Trek fans, one a diehard DS9 fan, the other a Trekker who hasn't yet seen the entire DS9 saga, as they watch each episode and present commentary on what works, what doesn't, what made us think, and what occasionally really stinks.
This way, you get the perspective of the annoying Trekker with all the trivia, as well as the fresh-faced newbie getting his first taste of Kanar. Seriously, it's more than just nerds-only stuff. We look at the writing, directing, social commentary, and ultimately, the legacy of the series. We've been at it for more than a season so far, and are thrilled at how well DS9 holds up more than a decade after it ended.
Audio Umox is free on iTunes, aka Apple Podcasts, and just about anywhere you pick up your favorite pods. Just search for Audio Umox, spelled AUDIOOOMOX.
Lobe up for the show. The wormhole opens every Thursday.
A little flexibility can go a long way. By refinancing your new or used auto loan with PenFed, you can lower your monthly payments for more flexibility in your budget. You can even schedule your first payment for up to 60 days from the date of your refinance. Calculate how much you could save at penfed.org/auto-refi or call 1-800-247-5626 to apply. Membership is open to everyone. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA. A little flexibility can go a long way. By refinancing your new or used auto loan with PenFed, you can lower your monthly payments for more flexibility in your budget. You can even schedule your first payment for up to 60 days from the date of your refinance. Calculate how much you could save at penfed.org/auto-refi or call 1-800-247-5626 to apply. Membership is open to everyone. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.